Hello, my name is Jake Rhodes with ADJ, and today we'll be going over our new console, the ADJ Link, otherwise known as the Airstream Link. Alright, so the ADJ Link, what is it? It's not going to be your full-line console with all the networking and bells and whistles, but it's also not your basic scene setter type board. So what exactly is it? For me, being a console programmer myself, I find this console being very much in the middle range of those two things. For people that are starting out on more of, your basic fader boards, this will be very comfortable for you having a lot of hardware options here. So for example, all my faders, which we'll get into in a second. But for people like myself that are familiar with the more advanced type of consoles, you also will find that there are a lot of really cool, nifty tricks, especially when it comes to the effects engine that are built into this program. So while it is simple, it is also advanced to the point where you can effectively control your lights very easily and create very effective and powerful lighting looks and shows, all from a very simple, easy, and intuitive controller. And if I had to say anything about the Link, it is definitely intuitive, easy to learn, and easy to operate. That being said, let's take a look at what we have going on here. So this is the Link. Out of the box, you will get obviously the console. You will also get this USB light, and I will go ahead and plug it in for you guys. And it is actually pretty nice. It stays exactly where you want to. And it has a touch-sensitive button on top here. So I'll turn it around so you guys can see. And you hit it once, and now that's on low mode. And then again is on medium, and then the third time for high, and the fourth time for off. So it's pretty nice. It's a very well-lit room right now, so you can't really see, but it's a very powerful USB light that comes included out of the box. And of course, we also include this USB type cable here. And you may be asking, well, Jake, how do I plug this into my iPad? And the answer for that is you have to get a certain interface. So the communication between our iPad here and the Link currently is done through wireless, and I will talk all about that when we get into the settings. However, you can also hardwire the connection between the tablet and the console, and you do that with this USB cable I showed you. The only thing you would need is an adapter in order to go into your iPad. And depending on what type of iPad you use will depend on what type of adapter or interface you need. So that's why we don't include it with the box, is because there's multiple types of connectors you can get. So you can choose which one is best for your iPad or best for your usage. Other than that, let's go ahead and take a look at this console. I'll start on the back panel here. So first we have our 4 DMX 5-pin ports, and that's going to give you up to 4 universes of control, which is quite a lot for a simple console like this, especially at its price point. Continuing along the back here, we also have there's a center black box, and that's actually the Wi-Fi antenna, and that's capable of emitting a signal on the 2.4 gigahertz range or the 5 gigahertz range. And the benefits of that, a 2.4 being it goes a little further and will penetrate walls better, but is also a lot more congested, especially in high networking trafficked areas. And that's where we get into the 5 gigahertz. While it doesn't penetrate walls as good as the 2.4 gigahertz range, and it doesn't go as far, it's a lot of an uncongested channel. So you will have a lot less network interference, especially if you're working in a building with wireless microphones. And then again, you can always just go ahead and hardwire it if you're having issues on the 5 gigahertz range as well. But from my experience, the 5 gigahertz range is very good to use. Unless, again, you are going to be walking away with your iPad through walls, which in case you might want to try the 4 gigahertz range. So in our fixture screen here, we do have a limitation on how many fixtures you can patch. So while you do have 4 universes of control, you also have a limitation on how many lights you can patch. As you can see on my screen here, we have several lights patched on this first tab, and you can have up to 32 lights patched on this one tab. However, there are 24 different tabs that you can program lights on. And that'll show what number you are up in this top right-hand corner right here. So either you can navigate up or down with the arrows or on the hardware interface. So you can, in total, patch 768 different fixtures in that 4 universe range. Moving down the line, next we have our USB slot here, and this is where you'll connect the USB to hardwire your iPad. And then moving on, we have our power, which is again included with the console. That just makes sense. And then we have our Kensington lock. So in case you're worried about your console being stolen, or you have to worry about that in the space you're in, you can apply a Kensington lock to this or inside your road case, and you will rest assured your console will be okay. You can also apply a Kensington lock to the iPad itself if you would like to do that. Moving on, we have our rocker on and off switch. And now let's talk about some buttons we have on the actual console here. So starting in my left-hand corner and working across, we have our left and right tab navigation buttons. And just in general, I will go into the exact specifics on what these buttons do in their respective in their respective tab, because they have multiple different functions depending what tab you're in. But these are going to be good for in your channels mode, switching between what fader is programming on that certain channel. And we'll get into that in a second. But other than continue on, these multiple buttons here allows you to easily switch between your different tabs on your iPad, between fixtures and between scenes and effects and so on. For instance, I can hit fixture or on the fixture tab. If I want to go to channels, we'll be on the channels tab. Effects, scenes, shows, and subs, and so on. I'm going to go back to fixtures, but that's for nice, easy navigation. Right here we have mostly our faders and some other extra buttons. This is going to be great for 1, programming, and 2, playbacks as well. So you can run these in a submaster mode, or you can also use these when you're programming your fixtures in the channel mode, and I'll get into that later, but very useful for programming. Of course, we have our master, Grand Master here with our blackout button. On top here, we have another navigation button. As you'll see, I'm on my fixtures mode, so it's cycling through my fixtures tabs all the way from 1 to 24, as you can see on this little screen here. Go back to 1. And then we have our matrix of 32 buttons. And these, again, have a lot of multiple uses for these buttons. And I'll go into detail when we're on the respective page. However, you can use these to select fixtures, you can use these to select different looks or effects, so lots of different usages. Most of the time they're correlating between the 32 buttons here and the 32 buttons that are going to be on your screen in your effects or scenes, in your effects, scenes, or shows tab. Now, moving down to this range, we have another left and right arrow key, and these have multiple functions as well. Most of the time they're going to be for selecting different parameters. We have a clear button, which will clear your looks, your activated looks. Save, so if you're making a look in your channels tab and you want to go ahead and save that look, you can just hit that and it will go to the save page. Solo, which allows you to select one look at a time as opposed to many. And audio and tap we will get into later, but essentially allows you to go into audio triggering mode or to tap the BPM. Right here you can see more of that on my my interface here. And then we also have 4 encoder wheels that you can map to whatever functions you would like, and I'll show you exactly how you do that. And now that we've gone over our buttons and what this console has to offer, let's go ahead and talk about the Fixtures tab and get into what this console can do. All right, so this is our Fixtures tab. And before we get into selecting fixtures, we need to talk about general settings. So I'm going to go ahead and select this little menu bar here and go into settings. So working my way down, you'll see revision. And this is revision 1.0. At the moment, we do not have any updates since we just launched, but this will show your app version. So the next thing, which is a very big deal, especially for any really good console, you need to be able to save, transfer, and load your shows depending on what device you're on. So to save a show, I can go ahead and hit Save and Archive. Archive is basically saving a show, and you can type in the archive name. So I already have this show file saved as a training file. And I'll show you exactly where that gets saved in a second. To load an archive, you would go ahead and hit load, and you select what file you would like to select. Right now I only have one, which being my training file, and it will load that. So if I save my archive, okay, save my show, where does it go? So I'll go ahead and go back out to my menu here, go to my file folder, click on my iPad, and it will show you multiple different files of the apps you have on your iPad. For me, I have multiple different Airstream links installed, so you'll see multiple different files. Another thing to mention is that when using the Airstream, the ADJ Link console, you can only use the Airstream Link app. You, however, can transfer profiles, your custom-made profiles, across multiple different apps here, and I'll show you exactly how you do that right now. So when I click on the Airstream Link folder, this is where all of our saves are. So effects, lists, scenes, and shows are all things that are being actively saved into the app when I create them. And these are also going to be inside this archive folder. So this is my live stream training file, and all these same exact effects, shows, and lists are going to be showing up in this live stream training file. So it condenses all those folders down into one selectable folder. Profiles are the same thing. So you can copy and transfer profiles across multiple Airstream apps, or you can also back them up. So let's say, worst comes to worst, your iPad decides to crash, or you accidentally break it, it's non-functioning. So what do we do? So how would you transfer a show file from an iPad to another iPad? Well, it's very important that you transfer and back up your show files ahead of time, because right now all of these archives and show files are being stored locally on this drive. What I recommend is go ahead and saving your archives, aka show files, onto a cloud, or for instance, your iCloud Drive. You can also do Dropbox, that's another good one. Or you can also save it onto an iPad, on a laptop. So if you go ahead and plug your iPad into a laptop, you can go ahead and transfer the files there. But for right now, all you need to do is, I'm going to go ahead and hold this, and now I can go ahead and copy this, and then go ahead to my iCloud Drive and paste it, and it will save that archive on my iCloud Drive. So all you need to do is log into your new iPad that's logged into the same account, and go ahead and paste it into your Airstream link. For instance, I can go ahead and paste this here, and now I have a live stream file training 2. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this since I don't need it. It's as simple as that. So as long as you back up your files and make sure you save consistently with when you make updates, you'll never have a problem if your iPad goes down, because you'll always store it on your iCloud Drive, or a separate option like being your MacBook, for example. So that is saving archives and transferring profiles. Another big section, which is very important, for example, churches that have volunteers run their lighting system, and you have one technical director that makes all the looks for the event. You don't want anyone accidentally going inside your programming and messing up your programming. You can install a program lock. So I'll go ahead and click this, and it's as simple as entering a PIN and pressing done, and now it will lock all programming. You'll still have all playback features like shows and scenes. You can do as much playback as you want, but you will not. It will lock you out of the channels mode and editing effects. Basically, all programming will be locked behind this code, and you'll have to enter this code to change anything. Erasing memory. Erasing memory is great if you're moving on from one show file to the next. Make sure you back up and save an archive before you erase your memory. Very important. And just in case you want to erase your memory, you definitely have to go and type yes before confirming to erase it. So some safety features backed up in there. Networking. And this will go into what we talked about before, the differences between the 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz range. Right now I am on the 5 gigahertz range because I personally feel like that's the better range for the climate I'm in right now, because there's not many 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi signals around here, which will allow a better connection to my console. So we also recommend, and it states this in the manual, that you change your network name and network password when you get your link. And that's to protect nobody logging into the Wi-Fi network and messing around with your settings or your looks. And finally, last but not least, is snapshots. And this allows you to capture up to 8 static snapshots, or I would like to say looks, that you would have on your rig, and it can be saved into the Link controller for standalone mode. So all you need to do is go ahead and your fixtures and channels mode, or in your scenes mode, get a look that you like and you want to save into the hardware controller. You can save up to 8 snapshots, and it's fairly simple. All you need to do is create that look and hit save, and it will save the snapshot. And for instance, if your iPad goes down or crashes or something happens in the middle of your show and you want to be able to go into these snapshots, all you need to do is hold down the 1 button on your matrix tab and cycle the power. And I will show you how to do that in a little bit. And it will then and while you're holding 1, turn the power back on, and it will point SA on your little LED screen here, and you'll be in standalone mode. And then you can hit 1 through 8 to cycle through those static scenes. So that's a great backup in case something happens to your console and your iPad goes down. You can then have your looks on and be running your show, or as best as you can, through those 8 static scenes while transferring and getting a new iPad or diagnosing the issues on this iPad. So this is our settings tab here, and that will be concluding all the settings tab. All right, so we talked about saving these snapshots. Now let me show you how we actually use these snapshots in a real life scenario. So let's say my iPad disconnects. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it off here so it has no connection to the actual link itself. So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the 1 button here, and I'm going to turn off the unit and then turn it back on. And now, as you will see on the screen here, it says SA, and we're in standalone mode. So I went ahead and saved 3 different snapshots: my red, my green, and my white look. So now I'm in my red look, and that is snapshot 1. Snapshot 2 is my green look, so it will capture that static scene. And again, 3 is my white look. So I'm going to go back to scene 2 here. As you can see, this is completely off. There's nothing connected to the iPad itself, but I'm still having DMX Control and Playback. So that is a good safety feature. And one last thing I want to say regarding these snapshots: just because they are static looks doesn't mean that your looks have to be static. It might be hard to see, but right now my Focus Spot 4Zs are actually doing some really nice gobo rotation. So essentially, these snapshots will not play any type of effects. They will not do any type of color effect or anything like that. Any time where values will be changing because of an effect generator or a playback cue will not work with these snapshots. They're static scenes. However, what you can utilize are built-in modes to your fixtures. For instance, if you have a setting for my 15 hex bars that cycles through different colors of my macros, I can set it to that, and then now when I'm in this static scene, it will be cycling through my macros. Same thing with my Focus Spot 4Zs. I have some really nice a nice gobo on it, and it's rotating the gobo and the prism. So a nice movement scenes. So just because you are limited to static scenes doesn't mean your look has to be static. It just can't be changing DMX values from the console. So yeah, your static looks can be pretty complicated, and again, will save your butt just in case anything happens to your iPad. Moving on to patching. Again, we're going to go into my menu selected here and hit the patching tab. And this is where all my units will be patched. As I mentioned in the beginning of this training session, we have 24 pages of 32 slots each. So you can patch up to 768 different fixtures. So these are the fixtures that I have on my training rig here, and these are some extra buttons so you guys can see how patch works in a little bit later. So how do you patch a light? So let's go down here and patch under 4 a light. So when you click an empty slot, it will pull up your fixture library. So I'm going to hit 4 under page 3, and here is the library. So we have ADJ, Elation, and a bunch of other manufacturers. We also have a generic tab, and this is great for using, one, if your light is not in the library already, or you can use a simple channel mode, for example, a PAR. Just patch it in RGB mode, so for simple operation. Or you can take these modes or any mode here under in the fixture library and make your own custom profile from that, so you don't have to start from scratch. So we'll talk about that in a second, but for now, let's go to my custom profiles and let's patch in a 15 hex bar IP. So for now, this is going to ask me how many of these I'd like to patch in, and you can patch in as many as you like. I'd assume up to 768. So we're going to patch 1 for now. So I'm going to hit the patch button, and it's going to bring me back to my patch list screen. And you can see here, 15 hex bar, 30 channel mode, 15 hex bar, and this is what the button will be named. So it shows my universe, it shows that's going to be patched into universe 2, DMX address 153. So if I wanted to go in here and mess around with the settings, I can hit this little I button here. So now we are inside this fixture editor configuration. So fixture name is what's going to be showing up when you're patching from that fixture library screen. So make sure that this is very descriptive so you know what the unit is and what channel mode you'll be running. Button image, so you can assign a button image to your light here. So for instance, I have this as a 15 hex bar, and I selected the 15 hex bar image. So you can select whatever image you'd like. So essentially the difference between this 15 hex bar custom profile and the 15 hex bar IP profile that's in the fixture library, the only difference is that I put this button image here and saved this as a custom profile, so every time I patch in a 15 hex bar from that custom profile, it includes this button image. Moving on down, we have button name. So 15 hex bar, that will pop up when I'm selecting my fixtures in fixture mode or channel mode here. This is basically going to be the display name and what you see to select it. So I would not advise this for saving this as a custom profile, but for instance, if I have these 15 hex bar as my wall wash, I can go ahead and type in wall wash. And now when I pull up to select these units in the fixtures tab, it will be called wall wash. So you can get as descriptive as you would like for your application. DMX start address. So there's 2 different ways you can go about this. First is going to be auto mode. And auto mode is great because it will automatically assign a start address and your universe. So for the people that are not familiar with the ins and outs of DMX512, this will be great for you because you patch in your lights with what you want/have, and it will give you what universe plug you need to come out for that. So universe 2 will be assigned to the DMX port 2 on the back, 1 will be 1, 3 will be 3, and so on. So this is great in auto mode for the people that don't understand that and just want the controller to tell you what to patch the light as. However, the one thing you need to know when you're patching your lights in auto mode is if you hit edit in the top right hand corner here and you decide to drag this fixture to a different slot in your fixture page. I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Keep an eye, we're going from address 153 and now it's address 61. So if you are moving your fixtures around and you do not have access to change the actual address on your fixtures, it's really important to either not move your lights around in this fixture page, or what you can also do, and what I would recommend for most applications, especially for people that understand DMX512, is to go into override mode. Now I can set this to be whatever address I want. The only downside is that you can accidentally patch overlay multiple profiles together. So I'm gonna do this 153 again, universe, let's say universe 3. We'll do universe 2 again. And we're gonna just go back out. And now you'll see that universe 2, 153 is all sectioned off here and is gonna be red. Now, if I do the same move again, it will keep that DMX universe and address assignment no matter where this is. And it's also good to mention that every single fixture has its own unique fixture ID. So if you program effects on this fixture and decide to move it, even if you move the address, it will still be able to recognize this fixture because of this fixture ID that's been assigned in the internal configurations of the patch screen. So now that we've covered how to patch and how to select fixtures, I believe there is one more thing we need to go over, and I will go back to my wall wash button here, and that is creating custom profiles. So for instance, let's say that I have a 15 hex bar. It's not a 15 hex bar, but it's exactly like this, but instead of there being 5 different zones of control of configurable LEDs, there is only 4. So I can go ahead and select my number of channels. So I'm gonna bring that down, -4, and we still have 2 more. So I'm gonna hit 2 more again, and that deletes those channels from the bottom up. So now I only have 4 LEDs. And let's say, well, this device now has a pan and tilt. So I go ahead and name this pan, and fade mode will decide what type of fade and where this button fades when you operating different effects. So this is nice if you don't know how to mess with this. If you start with a generic profile, and then and then you can set the snap point here in the settings. Invert would be great. So if I accidentally hung one of my fixtures backwards, go ahead and hit invert. So it now inverts the pan. And then this would be scale output by master fader. And since I started with this as a red LED, it's not going to have the right settings for pan, and that's why, again, you should start with some kind of other fixture or in the generic slot. So I would turn that off for this look. And now this is pan, and again, I can say this would be tilt. It doesn't have the right settings on it, but just for channel configurations. And now I can go ahead and say, this is it. This is the profile. I love it. This is exactly what I need. Go ahead and hit profile. This will create a custom fixture profile, and you hit OK, and there you go. You will have a custom fixture profile. But I'm going to hit cancel for now. So that is the patch screen and how you patch different fixtures. Moving on, in our fixtures tab here, we are going to talk about matrices. So you can set a matrix of LEDs up to 150 wide and 150 long, 150 columns and 150 rows and 150 columns. So it can be very wide or very small. At least 2 by 2 is the minimum size. So on my rig here, I have 2 15 hex bars laid on top of each other. So instead of making a new one, I'm going to pull up this one, and you can see it's instead of effects running through one and then through the next one, for instance, if I had an effect, a color effect that started in the middle and pulsated out, it will actually start in the middle here and run the effect over these LEDs. So if you're having a large LED wall, or you have, if you want to create a matrix of multiple different lights or of pixel controllable lights, you can assign their function and exactly where they are in the matrix of other lights here. So this is nice because I can have color effects without it running through one and the other. It looks a little bit better where they position on my rig. So you can set the rows, columns, and name it. So once you've done that, you can hit save and it will save that matrix. So how do you select matrices? Well, in this selection configuration here, I can go ahead and select the 15 hex bar matrix, which will then grab these two lights. And when you're programming, it's different than just grabbing these two lights. So for instance, if I just did exactly how I did this here, grab these two lights, the selection order would be this unit and then this unit, because the selection order is very important when you're running with consoles or when you're running with effects, especially strobe or color effects. So now it would run through this light and then this light. However, if I deselect those and do the matrix, it now operates them as a matrix instead of two separate fixtures. Now let's talk about the microphone. That's all of our settings here, so I can hit X. X is to close. Now let's talk about our microphone mic gain master area here. So there's multiple audio and BPM effect functions built into this console, and we'll get into that when we're more programming. But for now, you can set the mic gain. So basically, what loudness the microphone picks up, and that is going to be the internal microphone in the iPad. So you can set it depending on how loud your area is. This is going to be your master fader. As you can see, I am actually pulling up and down the hardware grandmaster, and it's pulling that. Black would be your blackout button. And again, I hit the hardware fader and that translated. Audio mode will basically listen to your microphone and then pull a BPM off of that audio basically signal. And then I turn this off, so now we're back to just regular standalone. And then tap, either I can hit tap here. I recommend hitting it at least 4 times. And this will tap to generate a BPM. If you don't want to do it here, you can also tap on the console. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it generated a BPM from those taps. So essentially, if you are doing live console mixing and you don't want to do audio mode, but you want the effects to step up to that beat, I mean, that's pretty crazy, but there you go. Now you have a 511 BPM. It will grab it off of 2, but I always recommend doing 4. So now we have a slower BPM. I'm going to hit tap to turn it off. And now we are back in regular fade mode. So that has been our microphone and master fader tab. So now that we've talked about pretty much all the accessories in our fixtures tab, let's talk about how we utilize the fixtures tab. So now, how does this work? So we have the interface here, my iPad here, and we also have our console here. So there's multiple ways you can do it depending on what your workflow is like and what consoles you're already used to. For me, I'm very much a hands-on console guy, but for a lot of people, they're gonna wanna touch the screen for this. So for instance, I can touch the screen and select all my fixtures there. I can hit the clear button up here to deselect them. I can also hit the first button, fixture in the range I want to select, and then the last button, the last fixture, and it will select all those fixtures in between there. So if you're operating on the screen, you do it that way. However, if you want to utilize the console, for instance, I hit clear and it will clear that selection out. I can hit, you'll notice that this fader button, this little LCD screen says 1, so it is referencing that I'm on fixture page 1. So I can hit 1 on fixture page 1, and now I'm selecting my mod SDQ. Hit 6, and now I'm selecting my other mod SDQ. If I want to deselect them, I can just go ahead and tap them again. If I want to select a range of fixtures, I can go 1 through 5 and deselect that, 1 through 6, deselect that, 1, 6, 3, 4, 2, 5. So, for instance, for strobing effects, it will then follow in that order, and then deselect them there, or hit clear to deselect all of them. For instance, in my second page here, I can select whole different fixture types from 1 to 32, just as simple as that. So the way I recommend a user programming, so if they're used to operating lights within groups, for instance, if I want all my mod SDQs or all my par lights, for example, to be in group 2, I know if I can select group 2 and select 1 to 32, and that's going to be selecting all of my par lights. So if I'm in fixture page 1 here, and these were just multiple focus spot 4Zs patch, I can hit 1 through 32, and it will pull all the focus spot 4Zs on that page. So if you want to select everything on that page, but you don't exactly remember how many fixtures are selected, you can go ahead and just hit 1 through 32 all day, and you're going to select everything on that page. So for people that are used to groups, you can use our 1 through 24 pages in that way. But for my training, that's why I've assigned them all here. You can program them that way. So that has been selecting fixtures in our fixture tab mode. Now let's move on to how we actually program these selected fixtures. So programming selected fixtures. You can get to the channels tab either two ways. You can go ahead and hit the channels tab on the iPad here, or you can hit channels button on the screen. So even though I'm in my channels tab, I don't have any fixtures selected, but you'll still notice I have 01 here. If I hit down, I'm at 24. That's because this is still pulling information from the fixture screen. So for instance, I know, let's say I want to select all my pars. So I can, on page 2, 1 through 32, and now it'll populate these cells with all 32 of my mod SDQs patched on that screen. But for programming on my rig, I know that 1 and 6 are my mod SDQs. So now that I have my fixtures selected, it will display on the screen here whatever fixture I have selected last. So for instance, even though I have my mod SDQ selected, if I hit 2, which is my focus spot 4Z, it will pull up the focus spot 4Z. And if I deselect it, it'll go back to the last thing I selected, which is my mod SDQs. So if I am here on my mod SDQ, on my focus spot 4Z, and I'm programming, even though I have 1 and 6 selected, which are my pars, it will do the absolute best it can to transfer the data you program here onto other fixture selected types. But obviously, it won't do RGB because this function doesn't have RGB. But for instance, if I go ahead and turn on my shutter and dimmer on my focus spot 4Zs and deselect at here, it doesn't translate because it's a different fixture type. So always try to program within fixture types. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that out, and now let's get into some programming. So starting out with my mod SDQ. On the top left-hand corner here, you will see a generic hue, saturation, and brightness range here. For me, I'm actually used to a different type of figure, so I can actually change that out. But for now, I'm going to take my shutter and dimmer up, and I'll show you how I did that when we get to this selection area here. So I can, let's go 4 quadrants. Perfect. So now I can go throughout this range and change the color just either by, right now I have a mouse connected to show what I'm selecting, which you are more than welcome to operate in that way as well. Or if you want to take your finger and, go ahead and say, I want that to be red, you can drag it to red. Let's say, like for me, you're used to a different type of color image. So for instance, for me, I prefer a circle type RGB look. So I can actually go ahead and hit the camera button here, go to my pictures, and I have saved a RGB color wheel. So I can actually use this in my color picker. So select use, and now I have a circle. It distorts it a little bit because it's going to be into a square image, but for the most part it's there. For instance, I can hit blue now, and now my lights are blue. and hit red and then pull the intensity down to white. So if you're used to this type, or for instance, and right there I hit the button on top here and that selected, went back to my generic color picker here, and if I hit that again, it will pull back up the image I just recently had. But you can assign this to be whatever picture you like. For instance, this look I used to name a screen earlier. I can go ahead and click this exact color right there, and it will try to replicate that color on whatever is there. So I have a little bit more of a purple over here to the left. I know that's a white right here, so I can use that white. Green and more of a dark, not saturated green right there. So you can use whatever image you like to color code within our parts. So our next screen is going to be this tab over here to the right. And you'll notice when I have my pars up, they're not moving heads. So they didn't populate this pan and tilt screen. So if I go ahead and hit 2 and 5, which I know are my focus spot 4Zs, I can have pan and tilt parameters. I can now go ahead and do two things. I can obviously program them with the faders down here, pan and tilt, or I can use the screen just like how we did with the color picker. So you can either go ahead and click on it, or for instance, if you're using it like a regular iPad, go ahead, drag your finger across it, and the lights will be positioned in whatever orientation that is set on the screen. If you want them to be centered, aka basically home, pointing straight down, you can hit this little target button and it will go to the exact middle, 128, 128, which is going to be, for the most part, at least with our fixtures, going to be home pointed straight down. So this is really nice for quick moving heads and placing them quickly. I'm going to clear that out. So now moving on to our multiple tabs here. So I can use these in two different ways. Either with my mouse here, I can click and well, it doesn't work with the mouse, but I can drag with my finger. On the mouse, it's actually swiping left and right. Or you'll see how it says 1 through 8. And that's actually going to be my faders here. So as you can see, I'm operating and playing with my faders, and I'm just, all these values are going crazy. Clear that out. For instance, I can use my fader to control pan and tilt just like that. And now let's say that's the position I like right there. But now my lights are off. So I need to turn on my shutter. So there's multiple ways you can operate these buttons. So for instance, if I wanted to turn my shutter on at full, I can hit this very top button on my coder range here, and that will take it to 255, which is full. If I hit the button below that, it will bring it to 0. If you want it to not be any value, in which case we call that null, you hit it again, and now it will be a grayed out 0. So there is a difference between a green 0 and a grayed out 0, aka null. So the green 0 will actually still pull the value. For instance, if you're making a look, will still pull that value and hold the value of 0, while a grayed out 0 might grab functions from a separate button. And we'll get into that when we're programming scenes. But for now, all you need to know is you can make your scenes as small as a single fader. For instance, you can make those different dimmer intensities, or you can make them big, grand looks. So now we've done all the way on, all the way off, but let's say, for instance, my gobos, I want a little bit more, basically what we say resolution, or be able to scroll within smaller parameters. So let's say, let's go ahead and turn my light on. So you notice originally that it was not, the dimmer, which I need to turn on, was not within that 1 through 8 range. Like I said, either you can slide or use these left and right buttons up on top of your faders here and scroll over. So I'm on shutter and dimmer. I'm gonna hit 7 and 8, the top buttons, and now those are on. So let's go ahead and make those straight on, perfect. So let's say my lights were messed up, or for example, the gobo. and I'm not having good luck with my fader here. I can actually use these small rotary dials, and these are for fine movement. So you can actually get really fine movement within there. And now within my gobo slot, you'll notice that nothing pops up to tell me exactly what I'm selecting. There is no selection of different gobos. It won't show you anything like that. You kind of just have to play with it and see what it does. So for instance, with number 6, I don't know what it's going to be doing, so I can actually scroll clockwise, and it will now change my gobos respectively. So it's easier to do fine movement with the small rotaries, was what I'm trying to say. And the last way you can define parameters and assign them values is by tapping the top area here. So if I tap gobo, it won't work, but if I tap 67, the value, it will pop up this basically screen. You can type in 255, done, and now it will go to 255. You can type in 1, and now it'll be 1. You can also use the plus and minus buttons here to go very fine movement, or you can hit clear, and now it will go to null. So there's lots of ways of programming, whether you want to use the screen, you want to use the button system, or you want to use the fader and these buttons. So depending on what's your programming style, you can do it that way. So the last section here is going to be our encoder wheels and how those are assigned. So on my bottom right-hand screen, you will see PT color gobo, and that is basically the assigned function to those encoder wheels. So depending on what type of fixture I have selected, for instance, if I select my moving heads, it'll automatically go to this pan tilt color gobo section. If you go ahead and select your pars, it will go to hue, saturation, brightness, and white. Well, let's say, oh, I don't like that encoder wheel configuration. So I hit 2 and 5, which I go back to my fixture screen. That is my focus spot 4Zs. Go back to channels, and I can actually use these navigation buttons here next to my encoder wheels to select what they have done. So you can see I've saved my own custom one that is pan, tilt, gobo, and color. A little different, but you can save your own custom ones simply as easy as that. So for instance, I say I want to change these. I want my own custom encoders to be pan, tilt, shutter, and now dimmer. I can go ahead and hit save. And since I already have this name saved, it's going to overwrite this saved file. When you're saving a brand new one, it won't ask you this. Hit overwrite, and group success, group has been saved. And then there we go. I can now go back and forth, and pan, tilt, shutter, and dimmer are now all my definable encoder wheel controls. So you can select, there's many pre-made ones. For instance, I'm just going to cycle through a bunch of them now. Gobos, color gobos, pan, tilt, color gobos, hue, saturation, brightness, dimmer, and so on. So there's lots of different encoder wheel configurations you can create, and that's going to be completely custom to how you want to run them. So now that we have talked about how we operate and name and configure encoder wheels, let's say, yeah, this open spot look, it's the best look I've ever made. Probably not that far from it accurate. I want to save this look. How do I do that? Well, as I mentioned before, there's multiple ways. You can either hit the save button on my hardware screen, on my hardware here, or hit the save button on the top right-hand corner of the app. So I'm going to hit save on my hardware controller, and that's going to bring me to how to save a button. And for now, I have already made a bunch of looks. And the way I'm organizing my pages is page 1 is going to be my truss warmers, aka my mod SDQs. Page 2 is my focus spot 4Zs. Page 3 is going to be my 15 hex bars, and page 4 is my big looks. So again, you can group, you can use this page function as your grouping. So I'm going to go down to page 2 because that is my this is going to be where my focus spot 4Zs. And as you can see, I already have some other things named open white. So I'll name this something different. So scene file name. What's really important about this is that it is long and descriptive, because this is what you're going to be, this is how you'll know what each scene is from either the file folder or when you're in the tab screen. So you want to name this very long, descriptive name. So 4Z open spot white. Very descriptive, right? Done. So our second spot here is going to be our scene button. So you can assign this to a color. So for instance, there is no white here. So I will actually instead do an image. So on my photos here, for instance, on my larger look, I would assign these white open spots. But for now, I can actually take this photo that's white and use this as the button. So essentially what I'm trying to say is you can assign them colors, or you can put image overlaid on top of those buttons. Button label. So this is going to be very important. This button label essentially is what you are going to see when you're looking at the buttons. So you want this to be short, but descriptive enough that you know what it is. So I'm going to name it, white open. And just so we can tell difference from the other two looks that are white open, I'm going to name this one 2, for instance. So my fade in time and my fade out time, you can set this from all the way to 0.1 second to 99 minutes. So you can do a lot of customized applications with this device. I'm going to leave those 0, for now. So momentary flash is what you would use if you want this look to be an effects look, aka it's never on constantly, and you just want to press it and then unselect it. Basically, it'll only, while it's only selected, it will flash only then. So it's not going to behave like a regular look. I would use this for more of my effects when I am busking. So I say this is perfect. I want to save this, and success has been saved. So that has been my channels tab and how to save my scenes. Now we're going to dive into the scenes tab. All right, so now that we are in our scenes tab, let's go ahead and see what happened to that open white 2 look we just made. So like I said, I'm on page 1 currently, and we're going to go to page 2 where all my Focus Spot 4Z looks are. So the cool thing about the page system and the parameters of programming with this console, you can make them as small, controlling even a single parameter on a single unit, to as large as you want. So on my page 4 here, I have all my large looks. Page 2, I have all my small ones. So with my first range of buttons, these just control the color of the spot. The second one is more of my effect looks. So you can program this exactly how you want it to, small or as big. So for right now, I have my effect 2 selected, and you'll see my fixtures are going to go crazy. So you can actually layer looks on top of each other depending on if you have 0 hard zeros or null zeros when you programmed your effect. For instance, I can hit green spot, and now it will change that to green spot so that it's sharing those 2 parameters. And that is basically the basics of our scenes tab. You can either select them by touching the buttons on our iPad here, or our 1 through 32 buttons on our matrix panel here. So what do these buttons do up here? So clear is pretty obvious. It clears out what our selection is. Solo is very important because like how I was saying before when I was stacking these different buttons, solo will only allow you to select 1 button at a time. So even though you can stack these buttons the way I've set them up, red spot, vortex rotation, they don't stack all on top of each other. For instance, if I wanted vortex rotation look to mix with yellow spot, so I wanted a yellow vortex rotation, I would have to turn off solo, and now, boom, they are selected. But if I have solo on, for example, for larger looks, I don't want them to talk to each other, intermix, you can hit solo, and now we have our red walk-in look. Now we are going to go to 3, which is our jungle scene. I'm going to hit 3 here, and then we're going to go to our white wedding look, and boom, now we have only one scene selected at a time. So depending on what applications and what type of how you're running your console, you would either want solo on or off, and you can also turn it on and off by hitting the solo button on your console. All right, so now that we've talked about how to save a scene and how to trigger them in this mode and layout, we're gonna go over the submaster view. So there's 2 different ways of getting to this submaster view. The first and the easiest is gonna be hitting the subs button on your console here. The second way you can do it is if you look on your iPad, there's a little, almost looks like faders on different lengths up and down the fader. And you just go ahead and click that, and that will bring you to your submaster fader area. I'm gonna go back and do it with subs now. And just like how we had the scenes orientated to different pages, you also have your subs. So if I go to scene page 1, here's all my truss warmers, just like I had them programmed out in the other page. 2 is 4 Zs, 5 is my 15 hex bars, and then 4 is going to be my big scene / my larger looks. So in this way, you can now run them however slow and smooth as you want. So that's the one thing that's nice about the fader submaster tab, is that it will actually overwrite those pre-selected fade in and fade out times with how slow you move the fader. So there's multiple different operations, kind of like how a different console would work. If you hold the top button, for example, my strobe button, kind of like my effects flash I showed you before, it will turn something on and then turn it off as soon as you release. Same thing with the regular look, jungle look. So now it's on at full, and I release it, it will take it out to 0. The second button here will play the cue in its selected, pre-selected programmed fade in and fade out time. So this one has a 3-second fade in, fade out. So it's going to fade in 3 seconds and then fade out for 3 seconds. And I'll show you how to create effects in our second page here. But for instance, I have a, what's a good one? I think, let's do snake. So I can tab over to different playback buttons, just like how you could when you were programming in the channels tab. So I'm gonna go over to my snake look. And the reason why I'm choosing this one is because it has a lot of effects programmed into this look. And we'll show you guys how to make that in a second, but what I want to point out here is that operating these small rotary dials, turning it clockwise will actually speed up the effect, and turning it counterclockwise will slow it down. So for instance, I'll speed up the effect. So now my moving heads and my color chase is going to be operating at a higher BPM, aka it'll just be faster. And then if I turn it counterclockwise, you can see that my moving heads are moving a lot slower now, and the color chase is also a lot slower. So there are multiple ways to control the playback speed of your moving heads with either the tap audio button, your BPM settings, or even if you just want to have them controllable via the knob. So yeah, you can do a lot of really cool playback. I actually find myself using the Grandmaster on this console a lot. So for instance, you can go ahead and put a scene up and then go ahead and raise your submaster. Okay, scene comes down. Go ahead and raise your second jungle scene. And now we're fading up and fading down. Of course, you can also quick snap right into, go right into red. So I'll have my green look on here, master fader up, and go ahead, and now we're in our red look. Take that down. And again, you have to be careful what you have up and what's down, because you can pull different channels from you can pull different active values from other channels. So just keep that in mind when you're programming out. So for instance, just like that. And you can scroll through all the different pages just like how you would in the other screen. And that is your submaster and playback mode. now that we've talked about how we record and we run scenes and effects, let's talk about how we build those effects in our effects page. So just like how we got to all the rest of our scenes, I can go ahead and hit effects here. And that will bring me to a page of where all my effects are stored. And just like the scenes and similar to how the Fixtures tab works, the scenes in the effects tab have multiple different pages you can access. Except with the scenes and effects tab, you can actually go up to 99 pages. So you can store a lot of different scenes and a lot of different effects. And you're only limited by how many you can fill up. So saving scenes and effects, you can save a maximum of 3,168. I had to write that down. So lots of different room for effects and looks. So I have a couple of pre-made effects here. Basically what you're gonna wanna do is go back to your fixture page and grab the lights in the order you want them to do the effect. So I'm gonna grab my focus spot 4Zs right now because we're gonna talk about pan and tilt effects. So go ahead back to my effect tab. If I hit snake, and another thing, instead of having to go back into the channels tab and hit on, I can go ahead and just go to my 4Zs tab and hit white open. And now go back to my effects tab and now hit snake. So now this is the snake look I made. There's also phase tilt effect and square. And let's get into that editor and show you how those work. So I'm gonna hit the little menu option here in the top left-hand corner and go into pan and tilt effects. So in this screen, we have lots of different options to select from. First thing before we get into anything is that this 32 buttons of matrix right here also has a function inside this editor by itself. So these 8 buttons that are down here with all these shapes, I can press 1 through 8 and it will put the shape selected onto my pan and tilt X and Y range here. Also similarly, the buttons below that, draw, points, close, clear, etc., can also be selected by the second row. So let's make an effect. So for now, I'm going to use the interface now that you saw how I can select the buttons on my console. So I can hit my circle screen. And one thing you can't do on the hardware controller that's really valuable for with the iPad is that you can shape the effect exactly how you would want it. So for instance, if I think this look, for instance, if I hit play, this looks a little too wide, I can stop that and actually take, just like how you would operate your iPad normally, you can pinch to squeeze it together, again, vertically and horizontally, stretch it out. And if you go it sideways, if you do it on the sides, you can actually increase and decrease the total amount of size. So you can make some crazy quick effects, just like right here with your pre-selected lines, make pre-selected shapes. So for instance, I can make a line that big and over here, so it only does the effect on this plane. So let's go into a square for now. So I'm gonna hit play. And this little white dot on the screen here is gonna show us what our moving heads are doing. So if I go ahead and my encoder wheels will also have a function when operating this unit. So I'm gonna decrease the size a little bit and extend it out. So let's say I want, that's my effect, I like that. So I want it to be faster. You can do your first encoder wheel and it will operate the speed. So now it changes the speed to fast. As you can see, it represents that white dot will translate to whatever your units are doing, or at least as close as you can get. So now I can operate my phase. So now I am applying a phase to my lights. So for right now, they are exact opposites because I have full phase, and you can adjust that to wherever you'd like. If you want just a little bit of phase, just like this. Has to be over 50% if you have 2. And now we have a slight amount of phase over our lights. And again, you can also do fan, which will spread apart the lights in opposite directions. So those are kind of your editing tools. So let's say those looks are cool and all, but I want to make my own custom shapes and my own custom effects, and you can absolutely do that. It's simple as hitting the draw button. So I'm going to go ahead and click this draw button here, and now you'll see draw is lit up. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a random shape. I'm going to make this one, well, I made a snake before, so let's make this one a figure 8. So now it has captured that figure 8 basically with what I drew. So now that I have drawn it, I can hit the play button and it will play this shape back. And so I can take the fan out and really show you what it does. So that's draw. So you can draw a shape, and of course you can edit it just like how you edited the other buttons, just as easy as pinching it. So that's drawing a shape. I'm going to clear that out. You can also select points. So again, I can hit points, and the console, its lights will now play back with that effect, and you can shape it however you like. The third option here is either close, or to not close your points. So for instance, if I draw some points and hit play, it will bounce back to here. Let me make it will bounce back to the original. So it's basically either looping back. It's either looping or it's going to bounce backwards. So if I hit close, it will close. I have to stop the effect first. So I'll draw it again. Points. It will close that shape. It was the same thing if I would have done my figure 8 here. And let's see how I left it off a little bit. If I hit close, it will close that shape automatically for me. Go ahead, clear that out, and forward, draw that figure 8 again. Will either be the direction of the movement of my, slow that down, a direction of the movement of my moving head. So either forwards or reversed. So that is going to be your pan and tilt effect. So I'm going to make this a little bit nicer. Go ahead and draw another figure 8. Close that up. That's okay, it doesn't need to be perfect for this purposes. Let's say I like that. I want to save this, so you go ahead and you can hit save on the console or save on the iPad. You can also load a previous effect if you want to edit or change it from there. So I'll go ahead and save this. And I'm making my first row of effects be my pan and tilt effects. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 4 because that's an empty button I can save it on. And just like how we saved our files and our profiles, effect file name is going to be long and descriptive, and our button label is going to be short so we can identify that inside the app. So this is going to be figure 8 movements. Perfect. And just like our rest of our buttons, we can either this one you can't assign a color with because it's a pan and tilt effect, but it'll actually grab that shape we created, whether it be a circle, square, or an 8 in this case. And that's going to be your default, or you can apply an image to that and my button label. And for this, I'm just going to put the 8. So you can make that however you want. And this last but not least option is enable tap/audio sync. So that's something I'm going to talk about now, but it's an option for any of our effects. And essentially what that does is that if you have this option selected, it will allow the music BPM it generates from the iPad, from the music playing out, listens to the microphone here, will generate a BPM through that when you're in audio mode, and it will play back that pan and tilt effect to the speed of the BPM it's pulling from that music. The same thing goes from our tap function, how we operated it earlier. If you tap the BPM, this pan and tilt effect will now go to the BPM of what you have tapped instead of the speed you have programmed it on. That's why it's important to either know if you have this selected or not selected, and also inside your fader that we were talking about earlier, if you have tap or audio on. So I'm going to deselect that because I don't want it to change. because I like how it is, for example, and I'm gonna hit save. And it says success effect has been saved. So we're gonna hit OK, and now we can back out here, and here is our figure 8. So that is pan and tilt effects. And just like with any scene or look, you can start assigning different looks to this. So right now this is called pinwheel rotation. I put blue spot on, go back to my effects tab and select the figure 8, and I can actually go to my scenes tab and save this. And let's go to, since it's only my focus spot 4Zs, we'll save this as another look, and we'll call this blue pinwheel figure 8. So remember, that's our long descriptive name. And scene button, blue, perfect. Button label, blue pinwheel 8. And fade in, fade out times or momentary flash, I'm gonna leave those off for this demo's purposes, and save. So now I have saved this pan and tilt effect into my blue pinwheel 8 slot here. So back to effects. The next type of effect I want to talk about is going to be our flash / chase effect. All right, so let's talk about flash effects. And before we even go into this tab, the first thing I want to mention when it comes to flashing / chase effects is fixture selection is everything when it comes to building these chases. So we're going to go back to fixture mode here, and you'll notice I have my 2 focus spot 4Zs selected. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm actually going to go to page 2, and I'm going to select them in a funky order and show you exactly how that translates. So I'm just going to start hitting random buttons. I started with 13, then 2, etc. over and over again, and now I'm just going to, great, I've selected a bunch of random buttons in a random order. So if I go to my effects tab and hit flash, and I hit this first effect button right here, and again, just like with our pan and tilt, these buttons down here transfer to my button matrix. So now if I hit play on this first step and I go to my page 2 by swiping over, you will see that it is playing back this effect in the exact order that I typed it. And depending on what type of flash effect you are choosing from this list down here, will depend exactly how that plays back. But what I'm trying to get across is you need to select your fixtures in the order you want them to chase, essentially. So let's get out of here and go back to my fixtures tab and deselect everything. I also could have hit clear there, so workflow, and go back to my actual lights I have patched in my rig. So I'm gonna hit 1 through 6. I'm gonna hit 1 through 6, and that's gonna select my lights. And we're gonna go back into effects and do like we just did, go to our flash effect. And it's not going to flash our 15 hex bar IPs because it actually doesn't have a master dimmer. So this pulls from the master dimmer. So right now, as you can see on my screen here, and we can just go with the iPad screen for this, Candace, thank you so much. So it's going to be chasing through these different values. So this first flash will basically do it in order selected. This will work from the center and out. This third one will do basically odds and evens or basically breaking it up into different groups. This will do left and right, depending on how many you selected. And this one right here is going to be completely random. So this one will just follow in whatever order. And this one right here is going to be your basically flash / strobe value, be able to flash these faster. Now talking about these buttons down here, record. This gives you the option to record your own chases, moving through steps right here. So I'll turn this off. Clear will clear out whatever you have done. loop and bounce basically means kind of like how we were saying with our pan and tilt effect. Either it will loop through and go back, it's 3 effects, either it'll go 1, 2, 3 and go back to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or it will go 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. So basically defining how that loops or bounces back when you reach the end of your effect. Single or add will basically, I'll play it just to show you. So single will allow only one fixture be selected, and add will add them up until you reach the last one. It will turn them all off. Flash or minus flash means when it is playing those, whether it will turn the light on or turn it off. So right now with flash minus, it is actually leaving the units on, and when that chase is being triggered, it's actually turning the lights off and then turning them back on again. So basically that's what flash minus and flash plus does. So here in flash plus, it's only turning it on when it gets to that light in that chase. And again, forward or reverse changes the direction of that chase. So I'm gonna go ahead and start from scratch here. And let's make our own custom effect. So if I hit record, you'll notice this button down here turns red, and I can start hitting buttons in the exact order I want. So let's say I want my 4 Z's to flash first, and then I want to come out, and then my mod SDQs to flash, and then turn off. My bad, I messed that up. So let me start that over again. All right, so let's start a basic flash over again, and this time we're going to record our own effect. So when we hit record, you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner, this record box turns to red for recording. So essentially, you're going to want to keep an eye out on whatever you select in your step number. So let's say I want to flash my 4 Z's, then my mod SDQs out. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 steps, depending on if we want to turn it off. So my first step, I'm going to turn this one on. My second step is going to be my second focus spot 4Z, and I'm using these left and right arrows to cycle through my steps. My third step is going to be my mod SDQ, and my fourth step is going to be my second mod SDQ. So if I hit play, it is now going between those 4 parameters exactly how I selected them. And again, you can start doing loop, single, flash minus or plus. So basically all those effect chain modifiers, including speed and intensity parameters, will apply to that custom made effect. So again, just like how we saved our last look, go ahead and select an empty button, name it, put your selected image, your button label, and if you want to add tap audio, enable tap/audio sync, and go ahead and save it. So that has been our flash effects. Now let's talk about color effects. All right, so for our color effects, we're gonna go ahead and select our truss warmer parse and our matrix we made earlier. So the reason why I'm not going to select my 15 hex bars, and if you were listening to when I was talking about how these work earlier, is because essentially I do not want to grab these as 2 independent fixtures. I want to grab these lights as a matrix, and also the order of what you select will also matter. So I'm going to go ahead and select my mod SDQ. Then I'm going to select my 15 hex bar IP matrix, and it will highlight these because it is grabbing them, but in a different order format. So it's important that you distinguish the difference between your lights and your matrix, because you can program them separately and differently, and they will do different things. And then I will grab my last mod SDQ by pressing 6. So now let's go back into the effects tab and start creating a color effect. So let's talk color effects. So this bar on top here will essentially try to mimic and show you what that effect is going to be doing. For instance, I'm going to click my first pre-made effect, and again, you can trigger those via the 1 through 8 keys on my hardware 32 button matrix here, but I'm just going to go ahead and press them on the app. My first one is called a hue gamut effect. So I'm going to select that, and essentially that's an RGB rainbow wave. And you might say, oh, well, my bars aren't on. So we can go ahead and go to channels and select 1 and 6 and turn those dimmers and shutters on. Or we could have went to a scene and pulled up a scene that had those on. Again, user preference. So now I still have all my buttons selected. So I'm gonna go back and just grab the fixture order just in case. Go to effects, and now let's play this effect that I just made here. So you may notice this little pop-up that came down right here, and this is actually our programmed matrix. So I only have 2 rows of 5 pixels, so that's exactly what it's showing. If it was 150 pixels by 150 pixels, that's also what would show up. So this hue gamut effect allows you will scroll through all the basically hues in your color wheel. If this is just a generic color chase, let's say I wanted to limit that effect to just between green and blue. So do you see these little squares in the bottom corners here? I can actually grab those and drag them, and it will define a cutoff. So now my left cutoff is green, and now I will go ahead and drag my right side of the square to blue. And if I go ahead and play this effect, it will play these. Here we go. It will play them. Let me speed it up so we can. It will fade between those 2 colors. And we can also adjust my fade value here to fade more slowly or quickly, and my phase value. And it's almost going to operate like a visualizer here. Try to, again, show you exactly how this effects engine operates by showing you the blue and green scrolling across my 15 hex bar IP. So that's been our hue gamut effect. And the next tab here is going to be our random hue. So I'm going to go ahead and take down these parameters just so we start fresh. And it's going to be our random hue effect. And there's this one as well as one and a little bit of ahead of what we're going to be talking about. It also has the squares to define what range your colors will be from. So now I'm going to open up the range and I'm going to speed it up. And essentially this will start scrolling through random colors and the parameters you've selected. And you can again grab the phase and adjust your phase value to represent how much phase you want. So you can go ahead and speed that down, and you could define the parameters with those squares just like how we did with the last effect. There's third effect, however, will not pop up those limitations on your colors, because this third one is called a random RGB effect. So this will just throw whatever random RGB value is in the programmer, basically just randomizes it, and you can change the speed, the fade, and the phase from there. So not much customization with that, but again, powerful tool. This next one is going to be called a hue pulse effect. And now this is the last look that allows you to define the range of colors you want to select. So it's in here, and instead, let me rephrase this. This is why it's really important to define our matrices, because now it's starting from that center and working our way out. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust the phase value so it adds a little bit of delay. So as you can see on the screen here, it's taking that green and moving it over. If I had not selected the matrix effect, it would simply play on the top bar and then the second bar. So that's the big difference between grabbing them as fixtures and as matrices, especially when you're doing effects, color effects like these. So you can again assign what color range you want to do with these, adjust the speed, phase, and fade values. So our second to last color effect parameter here, and my lights are probably going to start freaking out a little bit. That's because this one is called an audio RGB effect. And what this does is it filters the high, mid, and low frequencies that are picked up through the microphone in the iPad and assigns different RGB values to them. Essentially, it's, in layman's terms, a smart sound active mode. So if you can just put this effect on and it will assign those random RGB effects to your high, mid, and low pulses. Not much I can change here. So my last button I have, and I'm going to press this, and that's called our audio pulse effect. And just like our last effect here, it does trigger with audio, but instead of breaking it apart into low, mids, and highs, it just listens to the low frequencies and establishes a beat, and will essentially do random a random pulse of these colors that you have pre-selected, and will pulse them to that basically beat that's playing over your either music or tap to audio, for instance. And just like our last ones, we can assign the value range of where what colors you would like to use. So those are just the pre-made color effects. And you may notice, well, Jake, you haven't really touched on these other couple faders that are on the screen, amber, white, and UV. And the reason why I haven't talked about those is because most color effect generators don't take into account the larger chip sizes that are often found in our current units. For instance, my 15 hex bar IP, which is a hex chip, is not just RGBW, it also has amber, white, and UV. Most color engines won't take those last chips into effect when creating looks. All right, let's get out of this pulse effect. However, what's nice about this engine is that you can, just like how we did our last two effect tabs, you can hit the record button, and now we are recording our own customized color effect. So for instance, if I want my first effect, see, I'm on step 1 to be blue, I'm gonna go ahead and hit next. Step 2, I want them to be amber, and this won't translate to our mod SDQs, but what I can do is also try to get an amber look with them with this color generator. And it's not playing back my matrix right now because we're still editing it. And step 3, I'm gonna do UV and try to mimic UV with my lights. So the basic 3-step program, I can hit play, and I'm gonna lower my phase value so you can see it's going to step through those 3 looks. So we have blue, we have an amber, and we have more of a UV look. So that's assigning those different values to the engine and cycling through them. And again, you can do speed, you can adjust your fade timing and your phasing values all through there. So talking about the last couple buttons on this mode, record, we just did that. Left and right toggles between our different steps. Clear will clear out all of our programming and basically all the steps we have done. So wide, and the other option is inside. And basically, wide will try to do this effect on whole units, on the whole look, and inside will take more detailed, basically for independently controlled cells or pixels. With our matrix, it's automatically set to inside, but if I had selected those 15 hex bars without being in a matrix, to get those effects to play on the inside of those pixels, because it has zone control, I would have to select inside. But forming a matrix automatically did that for us. So either wide does the phasing values and stuff on the whole look, or tries to do it on individual pixels inside that fixture. Loop and bounce, again, we've talked about that, whether it loops from 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in your steps. Forward and reverse, again, how the order of which your effects are being played back, and the play button. So this random 3-step, I like this, I want to save it. Just like our other effects, go ahead and select a new tab, name it, assign a button, or put an image on it, and name the label, and that's going to be the label that is what you're selecting, and basically want to type that out so it's easily called, you can easily tell what it is from our effects screen. And tap to audio sync, enable or disable down there, and go ahead and I'm going to save that. And clear that out, and boom, there is our effect, and we can watch it play back right now. 1, 2, and 3, and we're done. So that has been our color effect engine. And now we are going to move on to our last but not least effect, but I actually think it's the most powerful, the basic effect. All right, basic effects. For this, I am going to go ahead and go back to my Fixtures tab, and I'm going to clear everything out, unselect my 15 hex bar matrix, and I only want to grab my focus spot for Z's, and you'll see why in a second here. Go to my Effects tab, and let's start making a basic effect. So this almost will mimic what you see in the channel editor. And this is all of our 18 attributes inside this Fixtures profile. So we have pan, pan fine, tilt, color, gobo, etc., etc. So I'm going to start working on the basics and work our way through this. What the basic function of our basic effects tab is going to be assigning a random or assigning a type of sine wave to a parameter like this. So for instance, color. Color in a profile moving head like this with our gobo wheel will not work with the color engine. So something you can do to work, basically assign different color effects on a spot moving head like this, you can go ahead and click the dashed line here. That means dashed line means no type of curved. So I personally prefer the sine wave, but there's lots of different other types of waves here that you can play with. For example, triangle, ramp up, ramp down, square, pulse is a good one, random if you're into that, and random ramp. So I'm gonna hit sine wave and I'm gonna hit play and just show you what it does. So right now in my moving heads, it's basically, here, let's back up and do this again. And this time I'm gonna do it with a scene on. So I'm gonna do my open focus spot for Z's, right? Back to my tab, and I'm gonna do this really quickly just to show you how easy it is. Here's my sine wave and press play. So now my unit's gonna be freaking out a little bit because this is a lot of parameters it's gonna be going through. But you see this blue line that's on the side here? I can go ahead and with my fingers either drag the top or the bottom and define what basically values it's gonna go through. So I can grab this, and so now, as you can see, my lights are just going back between white and red. So that's a way you can do really any type of effect you want if you program it right. You can set again, speed, fade time, and phase offset between your heads. So I'll do 1. So now you'll see they'll do the exact opposite. I took phase offset to full, so they're doing the exact opposite of each other. If I take that back down to 0, they'll do the same exact thing again. And you can assign multiple waves to multiple parameters. So let's do, I'm just gonna start assigning random things. And as you can see, it is playing back those values here. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear all this out that I just did. Stop it and clear everything out. I'm just gonna start from new. Go back to my basics tab. All right, so that's how you can assign random curves and wave format types to these parameters and make some awesome, really random effects. You can also make your own pan and tilt effects here. Again, there's lots of different, this can basically do almost everything in the last 3 effects generators can do, except this is a little bit more hard to grasp exactly what's going on. So this is going to be a little bit more harder to understand for the people that just want easy control. But for people who know consoles pretty well, like myself and many people, this is going to be pretty intuitive. So now we can create our own basic effect that's completely custom to how we want it. So I'm going to head and hit the record button here. And now I'm going to see we're on step 1. I'm going to go ahead and take this fade time and make it 0, just so we can really see what's going on here. So let's say my first look, I want to be red. So now I'm going to hit my next step, and I'm on step number 2. And now let's go ahead, I'll clear this out because I actually Didn't mean to hit that. So again, 0 and null are different things. And let's go ahead and take prism 1 on step 2 to full. And that's going to operate my circular prism. Then on my second step, I'm going to start rotating it really fast. And on my fourth step, I'm going to go to a different color. So now I am in amber. So I can go ahead and press play, and it will play back these effects. So step 1, 3, and 4. So just like the rest of our effects, we can go ahead and save it, name it, assign a custom photo to it, and it will show up in our effects scene matrix area, so we can call it back for later usage. So that is all our different types of effects. So the only other tab that we haven't gone over is going to be our Shows tab, and let's dive into that right now. So now we're going to talk about our Shows tab. So I have the Shows tab up here, but if you need to get to it, you can always just hit the button on your hardware controller. And we're going to start by making a brand new show. And basically what shows are a combination of multiple type of scenes. And again, scenes can be as small as an effect or as large of a look as you want. So for this example, I'm going to start with my page 4 here because that's all my big looks. So my first one is going to be my blackout home button. And you'll notice on the right here, it says hold time 5 seconds. I can change this from 0.1 of a second all the way up to 99 minutes. And for whatever you need, the longer than a 99-minute hold time, you can go ahead and assign that same exact look to step 2. And a little far, scroll back up, and boom. Now, those are both playing on, you can set those to both 99 minutes. So I'm gonna clear that out, clear the show, yep, great. So now my first look is going to be, again, that blackout look. My second look is going to be, let's say it again, cycling through my main looks, the red walk-in. You can add steps by hitting this addition button here. Go down to page 4, and now we're gonna go to jungle scene, and last but not least, whoa, a little far, there we go, white wedding. So let's say this is perfect, I like exactly how this works. You can go ahead and hit save, and you can go ahead and assign that to whatever empty slot you want. And just like how we made our scenes, you can put a custom color in here or a custom image. I'm gonna make this one pink because that's a great color. So show file name, again, is long and descriptive. Button label is gonna be short so you can recall it. And this will be my, again, 3 main look cycle. Let's just call it show cycle, perfect, done. And something that's really important when talking about shows is the loop and link buttons down here. So you can probably understand what loop continuously and how many times it loop does. So essentially right now, once it plays through those 4 or 5, however many steps are in your queue list, it will go back to 1 and go cycle it over and over again continuously, indefinitely. If I go ahead and click plus, it will cycle 1 time. So for right now, it will cycle through it once, and then it will, I think, stay at that last scene. And then 2 times, 3 times, etc., on and on again. So it plays through those scenes, and what do you want it to do afterward? Either it will stay on that scene, blackout, for instance, or you can link another whole show to that show. So for instance, I can hit this show, and let's say after my main looks, I want it to go through my effect looks, which has a bunch of like some strobing, some RGB chases, and so on and so on. So I can link to my effects loop. And another thing to know on top of that, when you are making the effects loop, you have to be sure how many times you set that to loop, or if it linked from there, because you can get into a whole linked show crazy phenomenon. So make sure you're programming the right types of loop and the right types of linked as you want. And remember guys, you have 32 buttons and 99 pages. So if you need to make one exact loop that's set to loop 1 time versus loop continuously, do it. This console is a lot about pre-programming. So go for it. And the last button here is enable tap/audio sync. And again, that will cycle, instead of doing those hold times, it will actually cycle through those looks according to the BPM either pulled from the audio or what you tap. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Success show has been saved. And it is right back here, main show cycle. So to demonstrate to you how loops work, I'm going to hit effects loop to show loop. So that's one I made beforehand that goes through my effects, then goes right to my three main looks. And this is kind of, we'll get into how many times, you have to be careful on how many times you loop a certain look. Because on my effects loop button here, I have it set to go through once. But on my three main looks loop, I have it set to loop continuously. So when I press this effects loop button, it'll go through those effect loops and then it will link to the three main looks, but then it will go back to those three main loops over and over again continuously. So you have to be careful how you set up your different shows. So now we're on green, and now we should fade to white. Perfect. And now we're going to go back to red, right to that first look. And it's going to stay on three main looks. Loop. And perfect. So that has been our show area. And again, there's so many pages. Between the effects and scene and show page, you have so many different programmable buttons. So, you know, make it yours. Make it however your type of programming style fits you. That's something that's great about this console, is that you can set the workflow either to be on the console or the screen or however you want it. So really get to know this console and figure out how you like to program. Other than that, that has been our product review, overview, and a semi-training on the ADJ Link or the Airstream Link. The only other things I didn't mention was that this app can only be on iPad version 12.0 and above. So if your iPad allows you to be iOS 12.0, you can absolutely run this app. Again, only iPad. All right, so now that we're done talking about our shows tab, that's going to wrap up our ADJ Link or Airstream Link console overview and training. Thank you for joining me on this video, and if you want any more information on our ADJ Link product, go ahead and check out adj.com and read up. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.